Whenever we talk about democracy, we almost instinctively focus on our rights. We zero in on what the state guarantees us, what the country owes its people. But today, in this explainer, we're completely flipping the script. We are going to look at the exact opposite side of that coin, what the people owe their country. We are diving deep into the fundamental duties of an Indian citizen, specifically the ones enshrined right there in Article 51A of the Indian Constitution.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at the origins of these duties, break down the original 10, explore the 11th duty that was added later, and finally wrap up with exactly why these duties matter so much. All right, let's jump right into part 1, the origins and the historical context behind these duties. Think about this for a second. A constitution guarantees your rights, but what does it ask of you in return? That is the absolute essential question we have to grapple with to understand how a democracy actually functions, because for a really long time, the Indian Constitution didn't explicitly list out what it expected from citizens. The ideas were definitely implicit, woven into the whole fabric of the nation, but they weren't categorized into a tidy, specific list. I mean, we all know citizens have a responsibility to their country, but how do you actually codify that?
Well, this concept brilliantly illustrates that balance. On one side of the scale, you've got fundamental rights. These are justiciable, meaning if your rights are violated, you can literally march into court and demand they be enforced. But on the other side of the scale, we have fundamental duties. And unlike rights, these are non-justiciable. They essentially act as constitutional reminders of our civic responsibility to the nation and to each other. So no, you're probably not going to go to jail just for failing to strive for excellence, but these duties are the critical constitutional counterweight meant to perfectly balance those legally enforceable rights.
Tracing the evolution of Article 51A is actually a pretty fascinating journey. Pre-1976, like I said, these duties were just implicit, but then the government decided to formally express them, and they actually drew inspiration from the Russian Constitution, the erstwhile USSR. They set up a committee led by Sardar Swaran Singh to hash it out. So, in 1976, through the massive 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, Part 4A was officially added to the Constitution with Article 51A. Now, the Swaran Singh Committee had a bunch of recommendations, but the government initially just rolled with 10 of them. And then, jumping way ahead on the timeline to 2002, the 86th Amendment tacked on one more, bringing us up to the modern day. Moving smoothly into our second section, let's categorize and unpack those original 10 duties.
Now, spoiler alert, today the Indian Constitution provides exactly 11 fundamental duties. But to really grasp their foundation, we have to look at how that initial core of 10 was structured.
Think of this first group of duties as your personal checklist for national unity. They all fall under this overarching theme of patriotism and social harmony. It starts by asking us to abide by the Constitution, respect the flag, and respect the anthem. We're expected to follow the noble ideals of the national freedom struggle, and absolutely crucial here, uphold the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. It also says we need to be ready to defend the nation and render national service when called upon. Plus, we are explicitly asked to promote harmony and a spirit of common brotherhood across all our diverse communities, while totally renouncing any practices that are derogatory to the dignity of women. It's a really powerful foundation for social cohesion, right? Then the second half of those original 10 really pivots toward progressive growth and individual responsibility. We're asked to preserve the country's incredibly rich composite culture and heritage. It mandates that we protect and improve the natural environment, so forests, lakes, wildlife, and fundamentally, just have compassion for living creatures. It also expects us to develop a scientific temper, humanism, and a rational spirit of inquiry and reform. We have to safeguard public property, completely reject violence, and, I love this one, continuously strive for excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activities. It's literally demanding that citizens constantly level up, because when we elevate ourselves, we elevate the whole country. All right, entering our third section, the 11th duty. This is a huge narrative turning point that happened decades after the original framework. So fast forward to 2002. The government basically recognized that the entire future of the country was riding on the education of its youth. So they introduced the 11th fundamental duty. This one specifically mandates parents or guardians to provide educational opportunities to their kids between the ages of 6 and 14 years. And this is just brilliant constitutional engineering in action. The 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 pulled off two massive things at the exact same time. On one side, it created a brand new fundamental right, entitling children aged 6 to 14 to free and compulsory education. But let's be real, a right to education is pretty useless if a kid isn't actually sent to school, right? So in that exact same breath, the amendment assigned a mirroring fundamental duty to the parents and guardians to actually provide those educational opportunities. The right and the duty perfectly interlock.
Which brings us to our fourth and final section, why these duties actually matter in the real world.
So if you're wondering if this is all just symbolic, the Supreme Court of India itself has weighed in heavily here. They've emphasized that you simply cannot separate your rights from your responsibilities. They ruled that fundamental rights, fundamental duties, and directive principles of state policy should all be viewed as an organic whole. They collectively contain the true spirit of the Indian Constitution. They breathe life into one another. Without duties, our rights just become unbalanced entitlements.
Because they are so deeply tied to fundamental rights, these duties have a very real, tangible impact. They act as this constant, gentle awakening for citizens regarding their responsibilities to society. They build up a national sense of discipline, dedication, and commitment. But they also serve as a pretty strict warning against anti-national and anti-social activities, like destroying public property or disrespecting the flag. And practically speaking, on a purely legal level, they really help judicial institutions out. When the courts are trying to figure out if a law is constitutionally valid, they actually look to these duties as a compass for what societal norms and expectations ought to be.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. A truly successful democracy absolutely requires both rights and duties to coexist. The Constitution gives you your rights, sure, but it also hands you these 11 duties as a direct roadmap for good citizenship, from developing a scientific temper to protecting the environment to upholding the unity of the whole nation. How well are you upholding your end of the constitutional bargain? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and hey, keep striving for that collective excellence.